Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you!
The power of Christ is correct. I do not know what else would compel you to listen to this dribble. Please be aware this episode contains mature content and spoilers for all things The Stand, as well as Night Surf from Stephen King's short story collection Night Shift. His titles are so creative.
Welcome to episode 7 of The Horror of Babylon, where we are discussing Marvel's The Stand adaptation. Tonight with me, as always, is my good friend Daniel. Say hi, Daniel.
Hi, Daniel.
Well, I'm really excited to be here tonight for two reasons. One, because I absolutely love this comic, and two, because this is our last episode of The Stand coverage.
A long journey. Way longer than I thought it would be.
Yeah, so this is our 7th episode. We did 3 episodes on the book, 2 episodes on the original miniseries, only one on the new miniseries, though we figured out we should have done more.
Yeah.
And now we're doing an episode covering the comic and the Night Shift short story. It's been a long, strange journey.
Not a bad one, though.
No. So before we get into it, I just want to give a little bit of background on Stephen King and comic book adaptations. There's not a lot of them, surprisingly, because I think his work is really suited to comic books.
Yeah.
But there are a few, and I just want to go over them. The most notorious one probably is Creepshow, which was a movie and a comic that he did with George A. Romero directed the movie, and Bernie Wrightson illustrated the comic. Bernie Wrightson being the same guy who illustrated The Stand and Cycle of the Werewolf.
Yeah. And
then the novels that have comic adaptations are The Stand, The Dark Tower, and Sleeping Beauties, as well as The Talisman, although the comic was canceled and never finished. Novellas N and Road Rage both have comic adaptations. Road Rage is based off the novella Throttle that he wrote with his son Joe Hill. And then short stories, it's The Lawnmower Man, which I've read that one, it was really good, and The Little Green God of Agony. Those have comic adaptations, and that's it. Out of his whole bibliography, those are the only things that have been adapted on the page.
I find that really weird to hear, because you mentioned Creepshow, and the reason he did that is he's a big fan of like those old horror comics that, the Comics Code Authority sort of put a premature into.
And that was part of those comics were part of his inspiration for Salem's Lot.
Yeah, so you'd figure that he might push that more.
Right.
I don't know, but that's interesting to hear. I honestly thought this list would be longer before you sent it to me.
No, and I gave Daniel some homework. At the end of the episode, we're going to talk about what Stephen King properties we would like to see as comic adaptations.
Yeah, I got a pretty good list.
Yeah, and I said things other than it, because yes, we'll talk about it, but... all right, so jumping in, talking a little bit about the people who worked on the Stand comic. Was written by Roberto Aguirre Sacasa, who's well known for doing Afterlife with Archie, Riverdale, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. He did Loki 2010 and the Sensational Spider-Man. So
that's a good run.
Yeah, and Afterlife with Archie was one of those things, like when it came out, everybody was like, "Oh, Archie's kind of dumb and it's for kids." And then you take a look at Afterlife with Archie or the Jughead one where he becomes a werewolf, and it's like, oh, this is a whole new thing.
Yeah.
And then the same thing with Riverdale. I'm not a fan of Riverdale.
Me either.
But it's
popular.
It's popular, and it's like a more adult, darker take.
I've seen a couple episodes with a girlfriend, and it was not what I was expecting from a Archie series.
Right. And then one of our 2 main artists, we have Laura Martin, who helped on the art and did for the first 3 volumes, and then did some coloring on the rest of them too. Some of her art credits include some of my favorite comics: Joss Whedon's Astonishing X-Men run, Planet Hulk, the reboot of the Marvel Star Wars, Vader Down, which is a great Star Wars miniseries.
I still need to read the Vader Down.
Oh, Vader Down is so good. Secret Invasion, Avengers World, Wonder Woman Rebirth, which I have been reading, is really good.
Yeah.
She's worked with iconic artists like Matt Fraction, Bendis, Mark Millar, Jason Aaron, Jonathan Hickman.
If you put Mark Miller in anything, I'll read it.
Yeah. And then our main penciler is Mike Perkins, who's just worked on a lot of different franchises, mostly Marvel, but he has done Superman, Avengers, Captain America, X-Men, Thor, Carnage.
I'm pretty sure I have a lot of his Superman stuff.
Yep. And he's also worked with Bendis, Ed Brubaker, Jason Aaron's, Mark Millar as well. He has a credit on Civil War. So these are some pretty great artists. And I would say if you take one thing away from this book, it's the art.
Yeah. Very much so. I was honestly stunned, even just like a few pages in, how good a lot of this was.
Yeah, and even if you never intend to read this, I would, if you know somebody owns it or your local library has it, just pick it up and flip through the art, or just Google some of the art.
I Googled so many pictures from this comic. Screensaver on my phone. I got super nerdy and let it be a Facebook profile picture for a few days. Randall Flagg in this book is top tier.
Yeah, he's really great. All right, and then I want to get into structure and format. It is 31 issues actually spread across 6 volumes. And I really like the way they broke it up because it's essentially the same structure as the novel.
Yeah. Except
they kind of condense the stories down into almost like bottle episodes that each fit in their own issue.
Yeah, the way the comic is structured, it does what both of the miniseries really sort of failed to do when it comes to condensing the story but presenting it in the same fashion.
Reading this almost felt like reading the book again.
Yeah.
Because obviously it leaves stuff out.
Yeah.
But it leaves out significantly less, and it's really smart about what it leaves out.
If you're in some sort of really strange college course that has you read The Stand and you want the cliff notes, you could read this.
Yeah, you could definitely read the comic and be able to talk about the themes and the characters with no issue.
Yeah.
And also, if you want to experience The Stand, but you don't want to read a 1,000-page novel, this is a great way to do it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and spoil it. I think this is the most viable alternative to the actual book.
Yeah, I agree. It's my favorite adaptation, but we're going to talk more about that at the end. Okay, so we're moving on to characters. Normally, what we've been doing is breaking down every character. I don't want to talk about everyone because, honestly, I just don't think there's that much to say about Stu Redman in the comic.
There really isn't. Nothing that we haven't said before. Like, we could describe what he looks like, but, I mean, you know what he looks like if you've seen the movie or
right.
the miniseries or you've read the book. But there's a few of these characters that I think are distinct enough from those other adaptations.
Yeah, I've got a handful listed here that I want to talk about, and Daniel may have a couple to add. First, Trash Can Man. This was... The Trash Can Man in the comic books is just how I pictured him in the book. Like
100%.
I don't want to say a normal guy, but not what they did in the 2020
He was not Urza Miller.
He's a man who is a little deranged.
He has clear mental issues, but in the right situation, like when he first shows up to Vegas, he could pass. He had friends.
Yeah.
He's just a person who is hampered by his demons, which I feel, again, both miniseries failed at presenting.
So, in the book, if you pass Trash Can Man on the street, you wouldn't think twice about him. Ezra Miller's Trash Can Man, and even somewhat the Trash Can Man...
I call the police.
Yeah. And you could say that a little bit about the Trash Can Man from the first miniseries, too. He was a little crazier.
I thought that was bad until I saw Urza Miller.
Yeah, for sure.
I started grading on a curve right away.
But this adaptation of the character was perfect, and this is the only adaptation where we get the kid. Do you believe that, Happy Crappy?
I believe that, Happy Crappy. I loved it. I loved it so much.
And they basically did all of it except for the anal rape with the gun. But
again, if you're going to cut something, that's the one scene you could probably cut.
And also, it is a Marvel title.
Yeah.
So they don't tend to get
that dark.
Yeah, exactly.
Not most of the time. But there's rare exceptions, but...
Right. And speaking of dark, you said it earlier, and I agree. I think maybe the standout character of the entire thing is Randall Flagg.
I love the way he is drawn in this. Something that both the miniseries tried to do, which is something that's in the book, is when his face is veiled in shadows. But that's super hard to convey in live action.
Yeah.
In a drawing, though, you can use black ink and overlay it with red eyes and just a white smile. That color theory, it makes it pop, it makes it stick out in your head. It does a good face reveal. The way his eyes are drawn when he's talking to people, super... I would kiss these artists on the mouth for the way they portrayed Randall Flagg. This is not... Like, I didn't picture him this way when I first read the book, but this is how I picture him now, is just like this.
So, if there was ever going to be, and I'm sure there will be eventually, but if there was ever going to be another stand adaptation, I think my dream one would be a series of animated films, maybe like 3 animated films.
Yeah.
Kind of in the style of like DC animated films.
Yeah.
Like some of the like darker Batman ones. Mm-hmm. Using this even though this comic's Marvel, but using this
as a template.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree. That if you guys, we don't own the rights to that, so feel free to steal this idea. So.
Yeah, please. You don't have to credit us. It will be fine.
We'll buy it and we'll review it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure we'll love it.
Yeah.
Also, another character I want to flag up is Tom. What did you think of Tom Cullen?
I feel he was drawn in a way that was reminiscent of how I first reacted when I saw the first miniseries actor acting.
I feel like the way he was depicted, at least how his face was drawn, specifically when he went into himself, was maybe a little over-exaggerated.
I agree with that. It's like, here, again, it was the same reaction I had to hearing the Patrick Starfish voice.
Yeah. Now, this comic is from 2008, which is only 14 years ago, but... Like, that depiction of Tom, I do not think would fly today at all.
I don't... There are people with faces like that.
Yeah.
And maybe... Not maybe. Everyone deserves representation.
Yeah.
But there's a giant but there, in that there's a fine line between trying to represent somebody and making a caricature. And this was really dancing on that line for me. At least for Tom. Everything else I loved.
I did... like him, like his character himself, I thought they did a good job portraying.
Yeah.
I liked, even though I'm not crazy about this part of the book, like the last 100 pages where it's Stu and Tom, I did like how they do Tom in the comic book that way. I thought he looked really good with a beard. Tom Collins kind of rocks a beard.
Yeah, for me it was whenever they did a lot of the close-ups of him that was a little off-putting.
Yeah.
Like the single panels where it's just like really focused on his face.
Yeah. It could have been a little more sensitive, a little less exaggerated.
Yeah. Not that we think things like this are hardly ever intentional.
Yeah, no, I don't think that the artist was sitting there like, ooh, I'm going to offend so many people. No.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe there could have been another person who should have taken a look at it before it was approved and been like, yeah, this is a little...
Yeah.
All right, so moving on, kind of on the opposite end, maybe you'll have a different take. I'm excited to hear. I thought that this adaptation of Mother Abigail was kind of what they were trying to go for in the new miniseries, where they really kind of toned down like her folksy blackisms.
Yeah.
And kind of play her up as just like the strong woman she is. I think this is my favorite version of Mother Abigail.
90% of my opinion of this book is it did what the miniseries was trying to do right.
Yeah.
And Mother Abigail is no exception to that. They scaled back on some of the more stereotypical characteristics while still being true to the character.
We also got her backstory with the Weasel, her concert that she did.
We got that awesome dream.
Yeah.
I love all the dream sequences in this book. They're exactly what I pictured.
And her battle with the Weasels.
Yeah.
I was so happy. And that was like a whole issue that was just like her backstory.
We had a whole rant on not getting weasels in the miniseries and getting rats instead.
Whatever. And now, moving on to Harold.
Perfect. Love everything about him.
So, yes and no. I think that... Okay, so when I read the book, I wasn't a particular fan of Harold.
Yeah.
Because he was gross. But, of course, he's supposed to be gross.
Yeah.
And with this comic, I think this is the most book-accurate adaptation of Harold.
Yeah, again, if you want the Cliff Notes book-accurate versions of these characters, this has it. I think I preferred the miniseries portrayals of Harold as modern uptakes of them.
That's where I was going. But if you made me pick one, I would definitely go with Owen Teague in the new miniseries.
Yeah, he's the best.
Yeah, for sure. This is the only adaptation that makes him fat.
Yeah. And they do a pretty good job of portraying what King is describing, like especially that lawnmower scene.
Yeah, that was great.
And I've only recently started to get love handles in my 30s, and so seeing them drawn on people, I'm like, oh, I feel so seen.
Yeah, exactly. We need that dad bod representation. Did you think that towards like in the middle where he's in Boulder and he's like, oh, Harold has lost weight. And it's like, I don't think he's really lost weight.
No, that's... When you're trying to portray weight loss in any media, it's almost always hyper-exaggerated because the person didn't actually lose a realistic amount of weight. They either took off a fat suit or they gained weight for shoots later.
Yeah.
And it's hyper-exaggerated, where in real life, when you lose 10, 15, 20 pounds, you can see it.
Yeah.
But that's so much harder to draw accurately. And I felt like they didn't even try to draw it at all.
And the last one that I wanted to point out was the Stephen King cameo in towards the end.
I 100% missed it. You had to message me
So
it.
in the book, it's Whitney Horgan who's the cook.
Yeah.
Who stands up and says, oh, we're Americans. Americans don't act like this. And he stands up to flag. In the comic, it's Rich Bachman. Richard Bachman, Stephen King's pen name. And it's drawn to look like a young Stephen King. But basically, it's the same thing except for it's Stephen King, and Flag kills King with his lightning energy. And you get to see Stephen King, like, burning and his flesh melting, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I didn't particularly have a lot of thoughts on, like, Stu, Larry, Fran, Lloyd. Do you have any? Are there any other characters?
No, I mean, they're...
Nadine, maybe?
No, I mean, they're who the characters are. The art for them didn't do anything like it did for Flag or Trash Can Man, where it made me go, this is what I was picturing, or this is what I wanted to see from them. It was just another version of these characters.
Yeah, if I had one criticism, I wish that, like, the characters, specifically for, like, Stu, Fran, Larry, were a little less hunky.
Yeah.
Kind of look like Justice League B characters.
Yeah, they could have looked more dad bod. They could have looked a little more average Joe.
But I mean, it is a Marvel title.
Yeah.
That's what comic books tend to do. Also, they, in terms of the miniseries too, particularly the newer one, they just cast attractive people. Attractiveness sells. Apparently, sex sells.
I can't judge. My fan casting for Stu was Chris Pratt, so here I am talking about this.
Yeah, mine was Jude Law, who's a very sexy man. So I guess if I think about it, all of my fan casts were pretty attractive too.
Yeah.
Maybe we should, for a pre-show, do like the top 10 ugliest people in Hollywood that are also good actors.
I'm very pro that. I don't know if the rest of the internet is going to be.
Yeah, I don't think enough people listen to us for us to get in trouble about it, but we could find out.
That'll be fun. I support this.
All right, and then moving on to some scurry shit. We've talked about the art a lot. Just in general, I think the comic was scarier than either of the miniseries.
By a lot. It definitely left you with images that would stick in your mind.
The mom, the Campion's wife and baby in the beginning, when it shows their dead bodies in the car.
Yeah. It had the exact opposite approach of the miniseries, where it was like, well, we don't know how to portray this, so we'll let the imagination work.
Which is the right choice.
And the artist was like, well, no, I know exactly how to portray this. I can draw something super gross and would make you fear for your life.
All the plague victims are terrifying. The guy that they hung up on the streetlight and put the sign looter on him.
Yeah.
I think they tore out his guts.
Yeah.
That was pretty terrible. We've talked about Flag and how scary he is, and all the dreams in the corn with him.
Yeah, I also really like the coat hanger dream. I actually got one.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there seeing it in comic form made me understand how it probably wouldn't have been as good seeing it in live action.
Yeah. This was obviously done in between the two miniseries.
Yeah.
So this was actually the first adaptation to give us the zoo.
I don't have a lot more to say on the zoo, but it was a shocker.
Yeah. And I also want to highlight the animals, the wolves, the weasels, the crows. I just love the design on all of those.
I always find it when someone can draw an animal well to be super impressive.
Mm-hmm. I really like the one-page layout where Kojak comes back to Boulder, and you get to see his journey, and you see that he fought the wolves at Mother Abigail's house, how he killed 2 of them. I thought that was a pretty cool design. Is there anything else scary-wise that jumped out at you about this comic?
No, I think I covered everything that I really wanted to say on it. I still think that if you want to be left with an impression, this is going to do it. It's going to have those pictures jump at you when you're just sitting there thinking about it.
Yeah.
When you think about getting a disease, you're not going to think of the tube necks from the miniseries. You're going to think about them from this comic book.
Yeah, I completely agree.
The way even just the way the snot's drawn on them, stringing
so
on.
Gross. So gross.
It's gross. It sticks with you. It's inventive. A person drew this based off of book descriptions.
Yeah.
So that was honestly pretty amazing. It did the whole what we talked about, that traveling from person to person. Mm-hmm. It did that pretty well. I think it covered that in just a page or 2 pages.
Yeah, it did. After at the beginning where the sheriff leaves the gas station and he gets Captain Trips from them, and it says, well, he pulled over this guy, and that guy went to a diner, and he gave it to a family, and the family went to a hotel.
It managed to condense it, but it condensed it in a way, and it had the little viruses drawn. Mm-hmm. Going out. They looked almost like blood drops.
Yep.
And I've mentioned color theory a bunch of times, but the person, the colorist who worked on this, knew how to make things pop out at you.
Right.
And that's something you can get in visual media, you can get it in miniseries, but I think it really excels in comic format.
Okay, so moving on, we're going to talk a little about Sex in the Stand, and it's very toned down. There's a lot of insinuation.
Implication, yeah.
Yeah.
They'll mention something that happened, or mention something that could have happened. It's there's this go-to example that I use whenever you want to discuss someone being sexually violated, and it's, they did things to me. That's the phrase.
Yeah. There's a lot of that here. Yeah. A good example is Trash Can Man and the Kid in the hotel, where Trash is in his bed and the kid comes in and he's like, I know what you like, and it just cuts to them being done. If you read the book, or if you read the uncut version, you know what happened.
Yeah.
Obviously, Marvel's never going to show us that.
And this does enough to leave you with knowing what happened with I like to call it it's plausible deniability.
Yeah.
Oh, we didn't actually draw it.
So, what would you think this would have looked like if it was done by another publisher, like maybe Image?
Let's say, I think it's Todd McFarlane, that Spawn guy.
Yeah.
If the Spawn guy did this, it would have been... You still wouldn't have gotten stuff like full nudity, or at least not very much, but you would have gotten the actual scenes. He doesn't shy away from that stuff nearly as much. Even back in the 90s, his stuff was a lot more visceral, and anytime Marvel or DC approaches what he was considering edgy, he just ups his ante.
Yeah. Marvel and DC are both getting closer to that. Like, DC has the whole, like, Black Label thing now.
Yeah.
Which DC Black Label is much darker than a regular DC book, but it's still a little tame compared to maybe like some Image books or some Dark Horse books. Or
I agree to that.
Yeah, but they're inching closer. But yeah, a lot of the sex is cut, but I kind of expected it to be in a Marvel title. Even typically when Marvel goes closer to an R rating, it's more on the violence end than on the sex end. I can't really think of a Marvel title, in the Marvel universe or outside that's really had any kind of explicit sex.
Welcome to America, where mutilation is fine, but don't show a penis.
Yep, for sure. So I also want to... Did you mention any, or did you see any references to other works? Specifically, there's a big It Easter egg. Did you notice one?
I didn't notice it.
So when Nadine is giving her backstory, and she says she was a teacher, it shows her in a classroom. Mm-hmm. She has a Jack-in-the-Box, and the clown that's popped out is Pennywise, and he's holding a red balloon.
I feel dumb for not noticing these things.
There were some other ones, but that's the kind of one, the big one that I noticed.
That's cool.
Here's the part of the episode that I was really excited to talk about. What other King properties would we like to see adaptations for? And to get it out of the way, like, I would write a check for, like, it to get this same kind of treatment with, like, a multi-volume huge release that, like, is super true to the book and gives you lots of details, and you get... it could start out like when they're kids, and like we have a whole issue about Bill and his experience, and then the next issue is Richie and his and just on and on and on.
I already told you via messenger who I want to do that adaptation, and that's Junji Ito.
Yes, that would... Okay, so I want a manga one, and I want one like this.
Yeah, I'm a very big Ito fan. He does body horror very well, so I picture him being able to do the transformations very well, depicting the monsters super vividly.
The girlfriend from Gyo, who's like who gets bitten by the fish, is like transforming. That's so gross.
I love Gyo so much.
What other King properties would you like to see?
Pet Cemetery, and I would like it done by the Walking Dead people. I know
Robert Kirkman,
Yeah, I can never remember any of these people's names. And not that they're super zombified in Pet Cemetery, because they're really not.
Right.
But
people forget that's a zombie story.
But I do feel like that would be a good way to, like, sell the book.
Yeah.
Like, here's these minds meeting, and you could still draw them. The art's still good, even save the zombies.
Yeah. I feel like that could be like a good, like, one of, like, really thick graphic novel. Mm-hmm. Like, probably like 1,000 or more pages.
I think that's another one that it would be super easy to condense the story via visual storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, the original movie does a really good job condensing the story, and it's like 90 minutes.
Yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite King adaptations for sure. So Pet Sematary was also my first one.
I think that one, it's probably because I'm a little bit older now. It does adult fear really well, like fear of what stuff happening to your kids.
Yeah.
And moving to a new neighborhood and just things being weird there.
Ooh.
And that's just the kind of stuff that, even when I read it, I found it scary, and it just gets scarier to me as time goes on.
Yeah, that's a scary... What else did you have?
I would like The Regulators, which he wrote as Richard Bachman. Or you could do what he did as Stephen King, which was the sister novel, Desperation.
So I haven't gotten to his 90s novels yet, so
Yeah.
I haven't read those ones yet. I've heard good things, though.
I highly recommend them. They're basically I don't want to say they're the same story. They use... It's like somebody gave someone a writing assignment, said you have to use characters by this name, and it has to involve this situation. And it gave them to two different authors, even though it's really the same author. But that's how they read. The Regulators is far more visceral and violent, and there's a lot more Kingisms in Desperation.
So, another one that I had was Cycle of the Werewolf, and I think it'd be easy to do in like 12 mini issues.
Yeah, it wouldn't take all that long.
Mm-hmm. You could even like release it over a year, and you do one issue because if you haven't read Cycle of the Werewolf, it's 12 chapters, it's a calendar year, and each chapter is a month of the year.
I like that. I like this idea. I support this idea too.
And you could really just make it like a true adaptation of the book, maybe tweak some things to make it more visual.
Start a GoFundMe for this. I will donate.
Yeah. I think, and even like originally, the original concept for Cycle of the Werewolf was it was going to be a calendar, and each month would have like a mini short story.
And you could really just use the same artist too for this.
Yeah, which was, we mentioned earlier was Bernie Wrightson, who did the illustrations for The Stand and drew Creep Show.
Yeah, because I really like the way he draws werewolves in Cycle of the Werewolf.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite werewolf book, but it's up there.
Yeah, I think it's a really good one. It's more simple than most of his books, but I think it's effective.
It's effective in its simplicity.
Yeah.
Simple doesn't mean bad, and complex doesn't mean good. Those are just descriptors of if it's simple or complex.
Yeah, like, I mean, for me, Star Wars is the greatest movie of all time.
And it's a simple story.
Yeah, it's not complex. I mean, maybe when you tie in, like, all the various sequels and prequels and start talking about the timeline overall, it gets a little complicated, but the story itself is extremely simple. So, and then I also had what I thought would be like, this would never happen.
Okay, I want to hear this. I want to hear Ryan's never happened.
Naoki Urasawa, who is a manga artist who did Pluto, Monster, 20th Century Boys. Doing like...
I'm rock hard now. I'm on board.
Doing like a thick 1-volume, like big graphic novel adaptation of The Night Flyer, but just like playing up the detective side of it really hard.
Yeah, that is way smarter than I was expecting. Oh my god! Because Pluto itself.
Love you too.
Pluto itself is just Astro Boy, but what if it was a detective story?
And Monster is basically a detective story, sort of.
For people who don't know, Monster is my favorite manga.
Yeah, and 20th Century Boys is a mystery as well.
I still need to read that one.
Oh, it's one of my all-time favorite mangas.
Every week, Ryan gives me a reason to not underestimate him, yet I still do. Yeah,
that is something I would love to see. Those two plus Pet Sematary were the ones I had. Did you have any others?
No, most of mine were pretty basic. Carrie was another one, mostly because it was short.
Yeah.
I couldn't, because I mostly read manga, and the comic books I read, I don't follow very many artists except like some of the big names. Mm-hmm. And I don't think big DC or Marvel names should draw Carrie.
No.
I would want it to be a little bit more gritty. Carrie's a very bloody, very coming of age in the most realistic sort of way story. How many books open with a girl getting her period and being bullied for it?
Maybe this is reaching, and I don't know their name, but the person who did the Ring manga.
Yeah. And I was trying to think of, because was trying to think of some Western comics I really like. And Emmett, like we mentioned Todd McFarlane, I think he would be too gritty.
Yeah.
There's this like balance for Carrie that I want that I can't describe in my head.
Have you read Harrow County?
I don't know. That doesn't sound familiar.
It's Dark Horse, right? Yeah, it's a Dark Horse book. It's horror. It takes place in like backwoods Virginia. So it's very. It could easily be West Virginia, but it takes place in Virginia, or we call it Lesser Virginia.
Yeah.
And it takes place in a very small rural community that's paranoid of witches.
Huh.
And the main character is like a 14-year-old girl. And it starts with the execution of a witch from 14 years ago. And then you cut to this girl, you learn a little bit about her and her life. She's the reincarnation of this witch.
Okay.
And she starts like learning to use her powers, and when her powers awaken, it brings out all the hants, all the ghosts, all the monsters from the Virginia backwoods who had been asleep because when the witch was killed. Now her powers are awakening, and it's bringing out all these ghosts and monsters that are plaguing the townspeople.
Yeah.
It's really good, and I think that artist might be somebody who could do Carrie, but it might be something we talk about again.
And that's the whole. I guess we ended up talking about Carrie, but that's why it wasn't on my list. Was I was literally like racking my brain trying to come up with an artist for it, and I could not.
It also, I would like to see it done by a lady, because Carrie is a very personal tale about a young woman
Written by a man.
And in King's defense, he doesn't always write women the best, but I think
he did.
Carrie is one of his better ones.
I think he did there. I always tell people that there are exactly 2 characters that I've related to in fiction. That number's actually gotten higher, but it used to
Harold and Larry.
Harold's on there now. It used to be Carrie and Dexter fucking Morgan. From the book series specifically, because the way he talks in his brain is how I talk to myself in my head.
I don't keep up with that, but are you watching the new one?
I haven't watched it yet.
Okay, I've heard mixed things from different people.
Yeah, the books are also super different. He uses a lot of alliteration in his head. Like the first book is called Darkly Dreaming Dexter, and he does a lot of that talking in his head.
I remember you being a big fan of the TV show back in the day.
Yeah. I still like the TV show, and I've read 7 of the books.
How many are there?
I'm gonna have to look that up now, because I know I have 7 of them, and I don't think it was done.
All right, so we want more comics based on King properties.
Yeah, I am honestly disappointed with the lack of it now that we've talked about it.
All right. And then now we're going to move into Night Surf, which, if you're not familiar with it, it is a short story from Stephen King's first short story collection, Night Shift. Don't get those confused. The short story is Night Surf. The short story collection is Night Shift. Did you get a chance to peruse this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I read it as soon as we talked about it.
Okay, great.
I listened to it.
The basic premise is it takes place in the world of The Stand after the main events. It's about a group of teenagers on the beach in New Hampshire who do not go to Boulder or Las Vegas. And it's basically just them mucking around and talking about their lives. But they also found a guy who was dying of Captain Trips, and they decided that they would burn him to death as a sacrifice to their pagan gods.
to make the plague stop. Or keep them safe from ever getting infected. So their logic was a little spotty, but
there's there's 2 things to really talk about with this. Mm-hmm. The first is this, where they burn this guy alive. First, just in general, what did you think of Night Surf?
I thought it was passable. I was like, if you're gonna write a short story that takes place in the same continuity as The Stand, that this is something that could happen. Mm-hmm. This is something I would expect to happen in a post-apocalyptic situation. I don't know how many people have dealt with a teenager recently, but they are not great.
No.
I I 100% believe that some teenagers that maybe I stumbled into the New Age section would maybe go, oh, you know what? Maybe if we set this dude on fire, we'll continue to be good. It'll be super chill.
And he's not dead. He is dying, but he's not dead. And he's not unconscious either. They burn him alive.
It smelled like sweet Chinese pork.
Yeah. Oh my god.
I didn't picture the diseased man meat to smell so delicious. That actually, I hate how hungry that made me when I read that or listened to that.
This is actually one of his better criticized short stories, which I think it's passable is probably how I would describe it. I like it. I think it's good, but I don't think it's amazing.
It didn't sit with me the way some of his other short stories have.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just because I've been on the stand for so long right now.
So ready to be done, yeah.
And it's my overall grade for it. There were a few little things in there that I found interesting. The way they described the girl character. I think her name was Susie.
Yeah.
Yeah. The way they were describing her, it was almost like a less nerdy female herald is how it was coming off to me. And it was the herald that got to have sex.
Yeah.
And it seemed very realistic in that I don't know what options I have anymore sort of way. I'm a teenage boy. Here's this girl who's throwing herself at me. I'll go ahead and take her upstairs. And that's how it read to me. And I was like, oh, that's super realistic and kind of shitty, but there you go.
He was super shitty to her.
Yeah.
But I mean, she was, I don't know.
But that came off as me as probably one of the most realistic things King has ever written.
Yeah. The other thing that kind of jumped out at me about this short story, there's a little bit of some continuity differences with the virus.
Yeah.
So they do refer to it as Captain Trips. They also refer to it as A6, which I did a little bit of research. A6 is just supposed to be a synonym for Captain Trips. But they also mention a Hong Kong virus that some people got, and supposedly if you got that, you are immune to Captain Trips. Also, this takes place after the events of the stand, but people are still catching Captain Trips and getting sick and dying.
Yeah.
Whereas in the book, that really ends with the book of end one, with the end of book one. That people aren't really getting sick anymore. Everybody who wasn't immune has died.
Poor Needles.
Yeah, poor Needles.
Just sort of randomly getting sick. When I was listening to it, I was wondering if that was King hinting that maybe it could come back or adapt.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So you could say, well, maybe these people, this is New Hampshire, it's kind of a small, low-populated state. Maybe these people who are getting sick and dying late are people who didn't have a lot of exposure to it. Or is this King giving a really dark epilogue to the stand to saying that the virus adapts, that nobody's immune to it, and everybody will eventually catch it and die, i.e. Stu, Fran, Tom.
Yeah. I guess it could be either way. Sometimes King gets in those dark modes and he wants to write something super dark, and other times he just makes continuity error. No writer is perfect, and that kind of stuff just happens, especially when you revisit something or you write something as a sort of side story before you. Because was this written before The Stand was published? I can't remember.
So, Night Shift, the collection, was published before The Stand was published.
Okay.
Because it took him multiple years to write The Stand, and he had to give his publisher something, so he took various short stories he had written throughout the years and put together Night Shift and gave them that to publish while he was still working on
so
The
when you do something like that, there's going to be so it's probably just a simple continuity issue.
And Night Surf itself may have been written after the bulk of The Stand was done, or in parallel with The Stand, or maybe that was the first thing he ever wrote about Captain Tripp. So
and he was still refining the idea.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
On that topic, when he wrote Dr. Sleep, which is the novel, the sequel to The Shining.
I still really need to read that.
Right. It was published almost 40 years after The Shining.
Yeah.
The foreword in Dr. Sleep talks about how he had to hire one of his, like a Stephen King historian, to do continuity work on The Shining to make sure he didn't get stuff wrong in Dr. Sleep.
Oh, dude, this all just reminds me. Small aside, because I follow Stephen King on Twitter. His agent recently died.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, I just made me think of that. Like, you're talking about somebody who like knew the story and stuff like that. That honestly bummed me out.
Yeah, that is sad.
I can't imagine knowing someone for like 40 years and then.
And this other person that he had helping him with Dr. Sleep was one of the people who wrote like one of the King reference books. I don't remember which one, but like the Everything Guide to Stephen King or something like that. So they were like a super fan. That was cool.
That's pretty cool.
Can you imagine like one of your favorite authors like tapping you to say like, hey, I'm writing a sequel to one of my most iconic books and I need your help?
The only thing that I know lore that good for, it'd be like if BioWare is like, hey Daniel, we need you for the new Mass.
Their thoughts on Night Surf?
No, not really. It's passable. There's stuff in there that I liked, but nothing really struck me like a huge emotional chord for me or anything like that.
So there's no legit adaptation to Night Surf, but there are many student films, fan films, dollar babies, like something you and I could produce.
Yeah.
I think there's more than 10. I watched 4 of them.
I didn't watch any of them because I was digging through all of them to find an audiobook.
I'll send you 1 or 2 of the better ones.
Okay.
Most of them are under 15 minutes long. There is one that I'm not the type of person to do this, but this one was such a slog. First off, it's an hour and 8 minutes long.
That seems long for what this story is.
If you listen to the audiobook on regular speed, it's about 20 minutes.
Yeah, mine was like 22 minutes.
They did a film adaptation that's an hour and 8 minutes long. I eventually had to put it at 1.5 speed, and then I think I eventually kicked it up to 2 times speed to get through it. But basically, they just add a lot of talking and drama between all the teenagers, which was really hard to get through until at the end, like, one of the girls just like comes out and belts one of the guys.
Oh, that's
I think
not
like
fun.
Susie like beats her boyfriend, and it kind of made it worth it, but it was still
I mean, I'll just fast forward to that part.
I might show you that part when we're done, depending on how much time we have.
You and I should really adapt one of his short stories someday as a project.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with the Dollar Baby program, Stephen King will actually sell you the rights to one of his stories for $1 a year, and you can adapt a movie around it. The only condition is that you have to send him a copy of it for it to watch. Now, obviously, you can't do that for all of his titles. There's a list on StephenKing.com that you can do. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to do that for Pet Sematary.
Yeah.
So, and I'm actually going to pull up the list and see what's available now, because they rotate in and out.
Yeah, I want to do this now. This is now my dream.
Oh yeah, it's been something I've always wanted to do. So I'm looking at the list now. Ones that jump out at me. Morning Deliveries, Milkman #1. Have you read that?
I haven't read any of these.
Okay. This is a short story from Skeleton Crew about a milkman that randomly poisons people. Like, he's making his deliveries, and he kind of just decides, well, at this house, I'm going to put some rattlesnake venom in their milk. At this house, nothing for them today. At this house, I'm going to put a Black Widow at the bottom of their yogurt. It's really short, simple, and a cool one to do.
That one actually sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it is. The Woman in the Room is a short story from Night Shift. Frank Darabont, who did The Mist and Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
When he was a film student, he did A Dollar Baby of The Woman in the Room. It's about a woman who's dying of cancer, and her son decides to OD her on pain meds without the doctors knowing. And it's about his struggle to do that, and eventually him going through with it.
Okay.
Super, super deep emotional one. One for the Road. This is the Salem's Lot sequel.
Oh.
It's about a family that gets lost in the snow and gets trapped in Salem's Lot, Jerusalem's Lot, and gets attacked by vampires.
Well, we do have a snowstorm coming.
Yeah. And that's also from Night Shift. That would be great to do. Cain Rose Up is about a public shooting. It's about a college student on the last day of school who just takes a hunting rifle and hangs out of his window in his dorm and shoots a bunch of people on the quad.
I felt like I could play that part.
And I've read some other of these. I think those first few I mentioned could be really cool ones to do. Oh, and the last rung on the ladder is about a little boy and a brother and a sister who are playing in their barn, and they climb up the ladder to jump down into the hay.
This is the one that's sort of referenced in The Stand, isn't it?
Yeah, it's referenced in The Stand. The little girl, the ladder breaks when she's climbing, and her brother has to pile hay underneath her to catch her when she falls. And then in The Stand, there's a little girl, Gina, I think. She falls out of a hayloft and breaks her leg after her parents died from Captain Trips.
I remember you telling me about this.
There's a twist to this one that makes it really good. I won't mention it because I'm sure you'll read it eventually.
Yeah, I should. I'm gonna have to read some of these, and then we'll figure out which one we're gonna try to do.
A lot of these are Night Shift. I think Night Shift as a whole is just going to have to be a book
that we do.
Because so aside, it's got One for the Road, which is the sequel to Salem's Lot. It has Jerusalem's Lot, which is the prequel to Salem's Lot, and it's King's take on H.P. Lovecraft. It's a Lovecraftian horror about the origins of the evil in Salem's Lot.
Okay.
It takes place in the 1800s.
You know what? I might just go ahead and pick up a copy now so I can get started on it.
It also has Children of the Corn is in Night Shift. There's just a lot of classic ones. And my favorite, The Lawnmower Man, that nobody else likes. Which we'll talk about another time. Okay, so a couple more topics. How would you rank the 3 adaptations of The Stand as we're wrapping up our coverage here?
Okay, number 3 at the bottom rung is the most recent miniseries. What was
the
2019 or 2020 miniseries? It's at the bottom. I think in our previous episodes I covered most of my problems with it.
Yeah.
Harold aside, I think it's the weakest character-wise. I think its changes are lean more towards for the worse. Like for every good choice they make 1 or 2 bad ones.
Yeah.
Second would be, surprisingly, I thought it was going to be worse, was the original miniseries. The more we watched of the newer miniseries, the more I liked the older one.
Yep.
It is campy, but I've always sort of digged camp. And watching it, I go, if I would have watched this as a kid, I probably would have had fonder memories.
Yeah.
I remember my dad watching it and thinking that looks dumb and walking away. But watching it now, I'm like, no, I would sit down and watch this with somebody. I might use it to scare a nephew or something.
Yeah.
And then at the top is the graphic novel, which I think is as perfect an adaptation of The Stand as you could probably get.
So I agree with everything you said, but I actually have a little bit of a different answer. So I would put, yes, I agree the comic is number one, is the best one. I would actually put the 90s miniseries at the bottom and then the 2020 miniseries as the second best one. But I agree with you that overall the 90s miniseries is better.
Yeah.
And it's a better adaptation. It has less bad decisions. But I would say that if I had to rewatch one, I would rather rewatch the 2020 miniseries because to me it has the higher highs. Specifically talking about Owen Teague as Harold Lauder. Because there are so many terrible things in that miniseries, but his performance excites me in a way that nothing in the 90s miniseries ever. Like if I never rewatch the 90s miniseries, I'd be okay with it. But I know I'm going to rewatch the 2020 miniseries someday because I need to see Owen Teague as Harold Lauder again.
I don't know who we need to talk to for it. Probably people way out of our reach. But Teague should be in more things in general. He should have more work. But I definitely would love to see him in more King adaptations.
Let's go to his IMDb page right now and see what he's doing. Cause
just real quick. We'll take a little look-see-loo.
He's young. I'm sure he's got something on his plate. Okay.
Because I could honestly see him being in more. He works good as like modern uptakes of a lot of King antagonists. I could even see him being one of the bullies in Carrie.
Oh yeah, for sure. So post The Stand, he did, and I don't recognize any of these. I'm just going to read them out. Montana Story, which came out last year, and then Reptile, which is coming out this year, and then in post-production are To Leslie, The Pitch, and The Cow.
I'll probably go see Reptile just because he's in it.
Is this a horror movie?
Hardened New England detective unflinching in his pursuit of a case where nothing is as it seems. Sounds like a thriller, but it might be one of those thrillers with like a horror twist.
Scott Benicio del Toro, Justin Timberlake.
That's a weird dichotomy, but okay.
And Batgirl, Alicia Silverstone.
Okay.
All right. I don't know. I think that he impressed me so much. Anything he's in, I would give some sort of try.
Yeah.
So I basically have the same opinion, but I would just flip-flop the two miniseries because
the highs overcame the lows for you, and they just didn't for me.
Exactly. And now just kind of wrap it up, just in general on the book, on the mythos, on the legacy. What are as we close our coverage, what are your final thoughts on The Stand?
I highly recommend people read The Stand. I think that while it has its own influences, I can see how it's influenced so much that's come after it. I think especially the first two books are very strongly written, and there's even parts of the end that I like. I just think it falls apart in like the last 100 pages.
I think as I'm sitting with book 3 more, I'm getting to accept it more.
Yeah, you're at the acceptance stage of grief. I'd probably keep the rank that I had. I know you don't like to grade books, but I'd probably be like B plus range. It's not my favorite King novel. It probably wouldn't be in my top 5, but it would be in my top 10.
What I was thinking that we might do, instead of giving grades, or we could still do that too, but is as we go through books, just make like a comprehensive ranking of all the books we've read.
That makes it like a tier list.
Yeah, so so our next book is Phantoms. So when we're done with Phantoms, we'll say, okay, which did you like better, Stand or Phantoms? And then when we hit our third book, we'll add that to the list, and then just as we go, we'll just be building this list.
I honestly like this idea.
Okay.
I support this. So far, The Stand is number 1 on the list of books we've right now, it's number 1 on the Horror of Babylon.
Yeah, it's our most recommended book. So overall, And I am going to say, you've heard me say I'm sick of it, so I'm trying not to let that color what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
I think it is a very good book. It has a lot of high highs. It does have some low lows. Overall, I think it's got more good than bad. Book 1 and Book 2 are really solid. I really like parts of Book 3. There's a lot of parts of Book 3 I don't like. The miniseries, neither of them are amazing, but they both have their good parts and their bad parts. I think they're both worth watching at least once.
Yeah.
The comic is amazing. It's the best adaptation. But The Stand is Stephen King's most popular novel. It's like when you look up like lists voted on by fans, it's always at the top. I have to say I think it's overrated. Yeah, when you're using that context for it, I agree that it's overrated. I am shocked. Shocked might be too strong a word. I'm surprised that this is the one that is consistently ranked as his best book. I don't think it's better than It, Pet Sematary, Salem's Lot, The Shining, Carrie, a lot of the classics. I honestly don't even think this is better than The Regulators. I would rank Cujo above this. I still need to finish Cujo. Christine, I probably would. I just read the first 2 Dark Tower books. I love those. Okay. More Randall Flagg. I mean, I'll read anything with more Randall Flagg. In the first one, he's the Man in Black. Yeah, so it just that does honestly surprise me. I can see why people would like this book, but we're a fan of butts here. I do have a hard time understanding why it's a lot of people's favorite. Another but. I think that in a few years when I revisit this book and read it a second time without all the expectations I had the first time, I will probably enjoy it a lot more. Yeah. I could see my opinion on it growing over time. Yeah, that's fair. I can see that happening. And I don't want to sound like a negative Nancy. I would tell people to read this book if you haven't read it. Yeah, it's not definitely not the first Stephen King book that I would recommend. But if somebody said, "Hey, I'm thinking about reading The Stand. Should I?" I would say yes. You should read The Stand. Yeah. Highlights for me, stuff that I really love. Book 1, Fran. Love the Trash Can Man. I love the kid. I love Lloyd. Probably after everything, Lloyd's probably my favorite character. Good boy Nick in the first, Nick book 1, his story with the sheriff and the sheriff's wife. That is a great character building arc. And then Tom and Nick's relationship with Tom, and then Tom's adventures in Las Vegas, and then also Dana. Dana is just like one of the best. I wanted to put she's underrated. Yeah. I wanted to put a thing on there just like she's one of the best female characters, but that's not true. She's one of King's best characters. Yeah, she's one of his best side characters. If you were making a side character tier list, I would put her in the S rank. Yeah, she'd be very high. So and that's something we could do eventually is we could make like top 10 protagonists, top 10 main villains, and top 10 side villains, top 10 side heroes. I like that. Yeah. For me, big highlights, and these are just like little things that Daniel loves. I love the way the virus is shown to spread. Yeah. I love the government's reaction to it, because that's super horrifying and super relatable. The vignettes. Which you get in the comic. Or some of them. I'm a big fan of dream sequences and nightmares and stuff like that. When I write, I use that entirely too much, and that sort of stuff sticks out to me. I have super vivid nightmares. Right. I need to tell you about one when we're done with this. I just don't want it recorded. Okay, so I think we've set our piece on The Stand. Moving forward, as we had previously announced, our next book is going to be Dean Koontz's Phantoms. So we're recording this on the 14th. Our last episode dropped on the January 9th. So we will release this episode on January 23rd. So that means that our Phantoms episode will release Sunday, February 6th,
Early Valentine's present.
Yes, and then after that, we will also we'll do an episode on the film adaptation of Phantoms, which neither of us have seen.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
That'll be fun. And this is your second time reading the book?
Yeah.
And my first time reading the book. We previously had said we are going to go straight from Phantoms to It. We are talking about reworking our schedule to do some shorter books in between Phantoms and It.
I think that is needed.
Yeah, that's actually a conversation we're going to have when we're done recording here. So stand by for what we're going to cover. We will let you guys know within plenty of time for you to read everything. But it will probably be a shorter book, so don't feel like you need to jump on it as soon as you're done with Phantoms. But if you're not reading Phantoms now, you should probably start that. Although you do have some time, and it's not a very long book.
Yeah, I'm a notoriously slow reader, and I finished it in like 2 weeks.
Yeah. I'm not very far, and just a little Phantoms banter. I'm not quite at the halfway point, but I'm enjoying it so far. It's fun. I don't want to say any specifics yet, but creatures,
yeah,
they're fun.
Yeah, they're definitely fun.
I've had a bit of a mixed bag when it's come to Dean Koontz, but start of next episode we can both kick it off by talking about what our Dean Koontz experiences were like going into this book.
I am excited to give my Dean Koontz history.
Yes. But I think that about does it for tonight. I just want to say thank you to Stephen King for writing this book for us to kick off our podcast with. Thanks Stu, Fran, Lloyd, Larry, all you freaks. It's been fun, but I'm really glad to be done with this.
I am also very happy to be done.
And with that, we're going to say good night, everybody, and stay scared.
And now for the obligatory socials. Please like, share, and subscribe. You can find the podcast on Twitter at HorrorPod69. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Slasher, and Goodreads. Become part of the Disturbed community by asking for the Facebook group and Discord links. Send dick pics to the Horror of Babylon podcast at gmail.com. Support the show at patreon.com/the Horror of Babylon. In closing, you can let your friends know that the Horror of Babylon is available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, and all other major podcast apps. Stay scary.